Hi students, we're on day 4 of our class read aloud of City of Ember. I hope you guys have been enjoying these, and it sounds like only a few of you are watching these, but that's okay. I hope those of you that are enjoying it. I know I'm enjoying reading to you guys. And when we read last, Dune went down into the pipeworks. You know, he works there, that's his job. And while on his break or something, he went down into the, sorry, I'm outside, so you have to deal with outside sounds. So he went down to check out the roped-off tunnel again. You know, he's been there several times before. And he went down the roped-off tunnel and to the locked door. But this time, it wasn't locked. There was a key in the door. And he went inside and found the mayor in there with all kinds of supplies. Remember, they're running out of everything in their city. People hardly have anything to eat. And there was the mayor with his stockpile of food and supplies. Just he's been taking it all for himself. And so that was big, and Dune told Lena about that. So we're going to continue on today. We are in chapter 12 still. Chapter 12 is called A Dreadful Discovery, and that's where we left off. And also, Lena had just told Dune that her grandmother had died. And unlike Lizzie, who was like, oh, that's too bad, and wasn't really even listening, Dune actually did care, and he really felt bad for her. Okay, we're on, well, I started to say what page we're on just out of habit, because whenever I read to my homeroom class, I always say we're on page 163 for those of you following along. But I really doubt if anyone's following along, because your books are probably at school, so. All right, but anyways, we are on page 163, not that that matters. All right. Thanks, she said. Well, she smiled at him. Let's go and talk to the guard. Oh, they're going to tell the guard, they're going to report what they saw about the mayor to the guards, because they think that that may help. They crossed the square and climbed the steps of the gathering hall. Sitting at the big reception desk outside the door of the mayor's office was the assistant guard, Barton Snowd, the same one Lena had encountered her first time here. Snowd looked bored. His elbows were on the desk, and his chin was moving very slowly from side to side. Sir, said Dune, we need to speak with you. The guard looked up. Certainly, he said. Go right ahead. In private, said Lena. The guard looked puzzled. His small eyes darted back and forth. This is private, he said. No one here but me. But anyone could come along, said Dune. What we have to say is secret and very important. Very important, said Snowd. Secret? His face brightened. Grunting, he raised himself up from his chair and motioned them into a narrow hallway off to the side of the main hall. What is it? He said. They told him. As they spoke, interrupting each other to make sure they got in all the details, the guard's eyebrows gradually lifted higher and higher over his eyes. You saw this room? He said. This is true? Are you sure? He was chewing faster now. You mean the mayor? You mean the mayor is... At that moment, a little way down the hall, a door opened. Through it came 3 more guards, including, Lena spotted him by his beard, the chief guard. They strode forward, talking to each other in low voices, and as they passed, the chief guard threw a quick glance at Lena. Does he recognize me? Lena wondered. She couldn't tell. Barton Snowd finished his sentence in a husky whisper. You mean the mayor is stealing? That's right, said Dune. We thought you should be informed because who else can arrest the mayor? And once you've done that, the guards can put all the things he's stolen back where they came from. And then tell the city that a new mayor has to be found, added Lena. Barton Snowd leaned heavily against the wall and rubbed a hand over his chin. He seemed to be thinking. Something must be done, he said. This is shocking. Shocking. He started back toward his desk, and Dune and Lena followed. I will make a note, he said, taking a pencil from the desk drawer. Lena watched as he wrote slowly on a scrap of paper. Mayor stealing. Secret room. When he'd finished, he let out a satisfied breath. Very good, he said. Action will be taken. You may be sure. Some sort of action, quite soon. Good, said Dune. Thank you, said Lena, and they turned to leave. The 3 guards were standing by the main door of the gathering hall as Dune and Lena went out. The chief guard moved aside to make way for them, and they went through the door and out onto the wide front steps. Lena glanced over her shoulder. Before the door swung closed, she saw the chief guard striding toward the reception desk where Barton Snowd was standing up, leaning forward, his eyes shining with important news. Chapter 13, Deciphering the Message. Deciphering means figuring out. Dune headed for home, and Lena went in the opposite direction across Harkin Square. The little group of believers had gone, but the protesters with their signs continued to pace back and forth. A few of them were still shaking their fists in the air and yelling, but most of them tramped silently, looking tired and discouraged. Lena felt a bit that way too. Once Dune said he'd seen a door, she was sure that the door he'd found and the door in the instructions were the same. She had such hopes for that door in the pipeworks, but hoping so hard had made her jump to conclusions. She'd gone a little too fast. She always went fast. Sometimes it was a good thing, and sometimes not. Now Dune thought the instructions were nothing important after all. She didn't want him to be right. She didn't believe he was, even now, but her thoughts felt like a mess of tangled yarn. She needed someone wise and sensible to help her sort things out. She headed for Gloam Street. Though it was nearly 6 o'clock, she found Clary still in her workroom at the far end of Greenhouse 1. Remember, Clary is the lady who works at the greenhouses, where all the plants are grown for the city. And since Lena's parents died when she was really little, Clary was kind of like a mother to her growing up. It was a small, crowded room. Pots and trowels cluttered a high table at one end. Above the table were shelves full of bottles of seeds and boxes of string, wire, and various kinds of powders. Clary's desk was a rickety table littered with scraps of paper, all of them covered with notes in her neat, round handwriting. 2 rickety chairs went with the rickety table, one on each side. Lena sat down facing Clary. "I have to tell you some important things," she said, "and they're all secret." "All right," said Clary. "I can keep secrets." She was wearing a patched shirt that had faded from blue to gray. Her short brown hair was tucked behind her ears, and a bit of leaf clung to it on the right-hand side. She folded her arms in front of her on the desk. She looked square and solid. "The first thing is," Lena began, "that I found the instructions, but Poppy had chewed them up." "The instructions?" said Clary. "I'm not familiar with them." Lena explained. She went on to explain everything, how she'd shown the instructions to Dune, what they had figured out, how he'd searched the pipeworks and found the door, and what he'd seen when he opened the door. Clary made an unhappy sound and shook her head. "This is bad," she said, "and sad, too. I remember when the mayor was first starting out. He has always been foolish, but not always wicked. I'm sorry to know that the worst side of him has won out." Clary's dark brown eyes seemed to grow deeper and sadder. "There's so much darkness in Ember, Lena. It's not just outside, it's inside us, too. Everyone has some darkness inside. It's like a hungry creature. It wants and wants and wants with a terrible power, and the more you give it, the bigger and hungrier it gets." Lena knew. She had felt it in Looper's shop as she hovered over the colored pencils. Remember, they're talking about the part when she went to Looper's store and she wanted to buy some colored pencils because they are really rare in Ember, and she hasn't had any since she was really little. All she has is just a regular pencil, and it was even small. And so Looper had a whole box of brand new, never before even been sharpened colored pencils, and Lena loves to draw, so she was so excited about that. They're very expensive. But she got kind of greedy. She knew she needed to buy a coat for Granny, but her desire to get the colored pencils kind of took over. For a moment, she felt sorry for the mayor. His hunger had grown so big it could never be satisfied. His huge body couldn't contain it. It made him forget everything else. Clary let out a long breath, and a few of the scraps of paper on her desk fluttered. She ran her fingers through her hair, felt the bit of leaf, and plucked it out. Then she said, "About these instructions." "Oh, yes," said Lena. "They might be important or they might not be. I don't know anymore." "I'd like to see them if you'd let me." Of course you can see them, but you'll have to come home with me. I'll come right now if that's all right, said Clary. There's plenty of time before lights out. Lena led Clary up the stairs and into her new bedroom at Mrs. Murdo's. Nice room, Clary said, looking around with interest. And I see you have a sprout. A what? Said Lena. Your bean, said Clary, pointing at the little pot of dirt on the windowsill. Lena bent to see what Clary was talking about. Sure enough, the dirt was heaving up a little. She touched the pushed-up part, brushed away the dirt, and discovered a pale green loop. It looked like a neck, as if a creature in the bean were trying to escape but hadn't yet managed to pull its head out. Of course, she already knew that plants grew from seeds, but to have put that flat white bean in the dirt, to have almost forgotten about it, and now to see it forcing its way up into the air? It's doing it, she said. It's coming to life. Clary nodded, smiling. Still amazes me every time I see it, she said. Lena brought out the instructions, and Clary sat down at the table to study them. She puzzled over the patchwork of scraps for a long time, tracing the lines with her finger, murmuring the parts of words. What you've figured out so far seems right to me, she said. I think ip, orc, must be pipeworks, and iver-ink must be riverbank, so this bit must be down riverbank, and then there's a big space here to edge. Edge of what, I wonder? And does it mean down riverbank, as in walk alongside the river? Yes, I think so, Lena said. Or does it mean to go down the riverbank itself, down the bank toward the water? Maybe edge means edge of the water. It couldn't mean that. The bank goes straight down like a wall. You couldn't go down to the edge of the water, or you'd fall in. Lena pictured the dark, swift water and shivered. This word, said Clary, putting a finger on the paper. Maybe it isn't edge. Maybe it's something else. It could be hedge or pledge. Those don't make much sense. It could be ledge or wedge. Lena saw that Clary was no better at deciphering the puzzle than she was. She sighed and sat down on the edge of her bed. It's hopeless, she said. Clary straightened up quickly. Don't say that. This torn-up piece of paper is the most hopeful thing I've ever seen. Do you know what this word is? She pointed to the word at the top of the paper. Egress. Someone's name, isn't it? The title would be Instructions for Egerston, or maybe Egersman, or something like that. The person instructions were for? I don't think so, said Clary. If you add an S to this word, right where this tear in the paper is, you get egress, E-G-R-E-S-S. Do you know what that means? No, said Lena. It means the way out. It means the exit. The title of this document is Instructions for Egress. So Lena was right all along. All along she has known that, or thought, that this document was something important, something about a way out of Ember, because she's always had this feeling that there's something else out there in the world. And she's right. They live in this underground city, but it wasn't meant to be permanent. And so she was right all along. Remember, other people, like her boss, Captain Fleury, I forgot her name for a minute, thought it was like a recipe or something, and some other people had different opinions, but Lena all along thought that it was a way to get out of Ember. When Clary left, there was still over an hour before lights out. Lena raced across the city to Green Gate Square. She glanced in the window of the small items shop where Dune's father was reaching for something on a shelf, and then she dashed up the stairs and knocked on the door of Dune's apartment. Right away, she heard quick steps, and Dune opened the door. I have something exciting to tell you, Lena said breathlessly. Come in, then. Lena went across the cluttered room to stand by a lamp. She pulled from her pocket a tiny piece of paper on which she had written, Egress. Look at this word, she said. It's from the title of the instructions. Someone's name? Said Dune. No, said Lena. It's meant to be egress with 2 S's. I showed the instructions to Clary, and she told me it means the way out. The way out? Cried Dune. Yes, the way out, the exit. It's instructions for the way out of Ember. And I'm going to stop here for today. My students always get mad when I leave them on a cliffhanger. So Wyatt, here's your cliffhanger for today. See you next time.